Okay, so I just started off the recording, and we will kick off in 40 seconds. Okay.
Hi there.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second session in learning a bit more about green careers and careers in the field of environmental science. My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Robbins, and I'm an environmental science teacher at Westfield High School. You may also know me from my 24-year stint at Roosevelt Intermediate School as a 7th and 8th grade science teacher. This speaker sessions presents a really tremendous opportunity for all of us. It gives us a chance to hear and learn more about careers in the green and sustainable field. And it also gives us an opportunity to look at and think about what's currently state of the art in the field. This presentation series would not be possible without our presenters graciously donating their time and the hard work of the Westfield Green Team. Representing the Green Team today is Medea. Medea, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Sure. Hello, Medea Vilray here, Westfield Green Team. And I'm also, I work at the U.S. Green Building Council. Thank you for joining us either live or through the recorded session. We are delighted to be offering this virtual green collar career fair designed to show Westfield High School students and other students that are viewing it a taste of the wide range of potential career paths they may consider that support sustainability. Our hope is that you will be inspired to put your talents toward keeping our community, state, and country and the world green and sustainable. We are always looking for students to engage us in the Green Team. You may contact us at greenteam@westfieldnj.gov, and that email address will also be on the slide at the end of the presentation. Feel free to reach out to us about volunteer opportunities. And thank you to all our presenters for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Medea. So a couple of quick bits of administration of the presentation. If you have any questions, you are welcome to please type them into the Q&A box that you will find in the top of the WebEx screen. Thank you very much all for coming in and attending, and we're going to start off with Mr. Doug Zemeckis. Doug?
Cool. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for hosting this event and all your colleagues here, Medea and others. It's a pleasure to join to share some of my knowledge and experience here in going green or also going blue. I work in the marine realm, fisheries, aquaculture, and marine resource management with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Happy to share a bit of my own life history, some of my research and education experiences, and also then some ideas on career opportunities in marine sciences, fisheries, and aquaculture. So growing up, I'm originally from Edison, New Jersey, not too far from where most of the folks who are participating from in Westfield, so nearby there in Middlesex County. We, like many folks in Jersey, enjoyed recreating down at the Jersey Shore. We had a family beach condo in Normandy Beach in Brick Township. So when I wasn't playing baseball or in school, you often found me down the shore or out fishing. And I think that exposure and experience when I was younger, being down the shore, helped encourage me to develop a great passion and interest in our marine ecosystems and resources and being connected with them by being a recreational fisherman. I went to John P. Stevens Public High School in Edison, New Jersey. Wasn't necessarily the most science-minded person when I was in high school. I worked at a golf driving range for 2 years amidst playing a lot of baseball and fishing, as I noted. But I was fortunate to have the opportunity to go to Rutgers University. And when I was at Rutgers, I was there for 4 years, graduated in 2009. I got a bachelor's degree in marine science, so studying biological oceanography, so the biology of the ocean, everything from tiny algae and phytoplankton all the way up to fishes, marine mammals, how the ocean currents or the physical oceanography and the chemistry influence the biology of the animals that live in the ocean were some of the core things learning for earning a bachelor's degree in marine science at Rutgers. I also got a minor actually in geology while I was there. So I also have a deep appreciation for not only the current times, but the historical geological times and Earth systems and how they shape the resources and ecosystems that we have here today and the human interactions with them. When I was studying at Rutgers, I had an internship at the Haskin Shellfish Research Lab, which is part of Rutgers University down in Delaware Bay. Oysters are a key species down there historically and still for the aquaculture and fishing industries. Oysters and other shellfish are filter feeders, so they live by filtering natural water that's in the ocean and the bays. They feed on the phytoplankton for their energy, but they also help filter the water. So we studied their ecological role in the ecosystem and some of the disease dynamics for that species when I had that research opportunity. For graduate school, I like to tell folks when I speak to younger age groups still in grade school, I got a PhD and I went up to the 23rd grade. So when I finished undergrad, which 4 years after undergrad, I was then up at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, about halfway between Rhode Island and Cape Cod, pursuing a PhD in marine science and technology. So I had a deep passion for our marine resources, but particularly our fisheries. And this gave me a great opportunity to address environmental and ecological issues that are impacting not only the animals in the ocean, mostly fish, but also the people and communities that rely on them. We did all of our research in cooperation with commercial and recreational fishermen, not just working in the lab sometimes, but more often you'd see me like on this photo out on boats, working with fishermen, surveying resources, trying to understand what's going on in the ecosystem to inform fisheries management. Species like cod, haddock, even halibut, shown here, some sea scallop research as well. I then migrated back home to New Jersey a few years ago, worked as a researcher for Rutgers and UMass, but for the last 4 years, I now work as a marine extension agent with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. So we with Extension extend the knowledge from the university out into the communities, educating people in instances such as this of all ages on the science and management, primarily a lot with agriculture, but I work with fisheries, aquaculture, and coastal resource management. Some of the educational programs we actually have a coastal stewardship class as part of our Barnegat Bay Shellfish Restoration Program, where we educate all audiences on the responsible stewardship of our marine resources. We use shellfish biology and aquaculture as the primary teaching tools. As I noted before, the water filtration capabilities of shellfish, they provide habitat for other shellfish, seagrasses, finfish. They play a very important role in our coastal marine ecosystems. And our coastal stewardship course tries to educate people on how they can be more responsible stewards, both on or near the water, both practices when you might be out on a boat or at the beach or even on land, considering how you maintain, for example, your own home, fertilizer use and runoff, and how that impacts our coastal systems. So thinking of it as a watershed, what we both do on land and in the water impacts the health of our coastal marine ecosystems. Also involved in education and research on fisheries science and management. This picture is us working with commercial fishermen to try to improve the long-term sustainability of how they harvest sea scallops, trying to optimally catch the large scallops, but to avoid some of the small fish, small sea scallops, sand dollars, to continue to improve the sustainability of how our marine resources are harvested. Increasingly also offshore wind energy, which you might have already learned about, is an important topic. It's an industry coming to our coast of New Jersey, a form of renewable energy. Quite involved in working with our commercial, recreational fishermen and other stakeholders to address concerns as that renewable energy comes with its environmental benefits, but also some issues maybe on our marine resources and systems and how fisheries operate offshore. So in terms of careers, those with which I'm most familiar are in the marine realm: fisheries, aquaculture, marine science. In terms of one area of potential careers in marine sciences is academia. Of course, that's where I'm working here with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. In terms of education, most people working in marine sciences and academia tend to have at the minimum a bachelor's degree, if not also an advanced degree, either a master's or a PhD. A master's degree in our field typically takes about 2 to 3 years after undergraduate, and a PhD might take anywhere from 3 to 6 years as well. Some other career opportunities involved in marine science include state and federal agencies. As an example, here in New Jersey, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, they have a Bureau of Shell Fisheries, a Bureau of Marine Fisheries. They are involved with education, research, and management of our fishery resources, our coastal marine habitats. At the federal level, there's also the NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And some of these areas, maybe a bachelor's or a master's degree, are most commonly seen for employment to be involved in those institutes in marine science. In addition, there are a variety of nonprofit and environmental groups who are actively involved in research and education on the sustainability of our marine resources. Some examples in New Jersey include the American Littoral Society, the Nature Conservancy, Safe Barnegat Bay, down here in Ocean County, and the Baykeeper up in Raritan Bay, New York. In those instances, you do also most commonly see a college degree, bachelor's or higher, for folks who are involved in those research or educational programs. In addition to being involved in education or research, there are also career opportunities if you are passionate about these resources, and also being responsible stewards, being involved in our increasing aquaculture industry, shellfish aquaculture, so you can actually work in a shellfish hatchery, nursery, or farm. See quite a bit of opportunities in that, probably increasingly as aquaculture is the fastest growing form of agriculture in our country, both here in New Jersey and nationwide, and also opportunities perhaps to get involved with our commercial and recreational fisheries as well, as you might be interested. So thanks again for the opportunity. Happy to share a bit there of my life history, some perspectives and advice on careers in marine science. My email address is here at the bottom, and I look forward to any questions that folks might have. Jeffrey, you're on mute.
And that's how we save the world. So I also got my undergrad from Rutgers and my master's there as well. So Rutgers. We talked a lot in class about aquaculture earlier in the year, and we're going to be talking about wind on next Wednesday. So that's really exciting to hear that you're involved with it. And it sounds like you've had some incredible opportunities for research as well. So our next speaker is Angela Knowles, and I jumped her slide, and yeah, so Angela, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Jeff and the Westfield Green team for having me here today to talk about planning and sort of my career and how it's sort of ebbed and flowed over the years. My career for me has always kind of been about finding a job that fits my passion. My interest in the environment really started at a young age. I grew up on a farm. And as you know, to be a successful farmer, you have to be a good steward of the land. So aside from just being able to kind of run around the fields and play in the brooks and everything, that really kind of helped solidify my love of nature for sure. But to learn about how to be a good steward of the land really kind of started at an early age for me. Also growing up in a suburban town, I grew up in Hillsborough in Somerset County. Some of you may or may not know it, but it, to me, growing up, was the quintessential suburban town where you had to drive everywhere to get anywhere. I was very aware at a young age that people were going shopping and in places like Princeton and Flemington and New Brunswick and Somerville. And so growing up in a suburban town where we didn't really have a downtown, it became very apparent to me that places like that really make a community and make matter to people, give them sort of a sense of place. We were really a farm town. At the time, Hillsborough is now trying to develop a town center for itself and a downtown. So hope to see that come to fruition soon. But, you know, kind of going through all of that at a young age and realizing that I found that my passion really is in communities and in the people in those communities who make their passion their community. And so after going through school, I have a bachelor's degree in environmental policy, and I then went into a master's program for urban and environmental planning. I started to get a sense of how I wanted to apply my passion, I guess. I would say that my career has made me very well-rounded in that I've worked for nonprofit groups, I've worked for county government, I've worked for a private utility company that focused on water and energy, so a green utility company, and then working in a consultancy. But what I really wanted to kind of talk about more was planning itself, because, you know, when I tell people I'm a professional planner, they'll ask me to plan their next party for them, and it's not that kind of planning. There is that kind of planning, but that's not this. So basically, it's really the study and the relationship between the built environment and the natural environment. So that we know that there are places that we want to and need to protect, but we also need to develop. We need to provide infrastructure for communities. So the discipline of planning really helps towns figure out where the best places are for those things by doing studies, by doing research, by talking with residents and business owners in the community. And so then we come up with some long range, some short-term plans for the best way to protect the important natural areas and develop the areas where it makes the most sense. What I really love about my job in planning is that I'm able to help the communities figure out the best way to quote unquote do the right thing. And so when we talk about planning as a green career, you know, we have the ability to work with towns to create regulations for developers and in some cases for residents to follow when they're developing their properties, so that we can, you know, protect the streams, we can increase water recharge back into the ground. You know, we can add green elements to our buildings and our built structures. So so there's a lot of different ways that we can make planning a green career. There's also a lot of different areas of planning, which, you know, folks might hear about: transportation planning, infrastructure planning, there's environmental resource planning. What I tend to do is municipal planning, which is kind of across the board. And the way that we work is I work for a consultancy that towns hire us to handle their planning and engineering projects. And so I've worked on everything from plans that deal with affordable housing to farmland preservation to open space and recreation. And recently I've been doing a lot of redevelopment plans, and you might be aware of what's happening in Westfield here. All the talk about redevelopment areas and what are the long range plans for some of these areas? What are the impacts? In cases like that, the town might hire an outside consultancy that specializes in whatever that issue is that the town is working on. But in Westfield, you have an in-house planner, you have a staff planner that works in the municipal building and handles sort of all the day-to-day planning. Yeah, it's interesting in terms of it being a green career. You know, I find that I always thought that I had to be in the nonprofit world in order to sort of fight the good fight and do the right thing. But when it came down to it, it really, for me, it was more about the implementation. The education and advocacy absolutely is so important to, help folks understand why we should protect these resources. How does it impact them on a day-to-day basis, when they're just trying to get through their day? But in terms of planning and consulting with municipalities, it's really an opportunity for us to take a look at the towns and say, where does the town want to be in 10, 15, 20 years? Where are the areas they want to preserve and protect? Where are the areas they want to develop? And then really kind of work with them to solidify their goals and their the implementation that's going to get them there, the ordinances and regulations. And so for me, that's what really worked for me in applying my passion to the world. And in terms of careers in planning, as I said, there's a variety of different fields that one could go into in planning. There's state government. The state has an Office of Planning Advocacy. They oversee, we have a state plan, which hasn't been updated in a long time, but they're working on it. And basically splits the state up into different types of planning areas based on whether they're urban or rural or suburban. And so that office oversees all of the planning for the state. There's also county planning departments. And so each county has a planning group that oversees all of the planning for the county. And then there's the municipal planning. So, and every town is different. There's 565 towns in New Jersey, and every town has different needs, different issues, different challenges and opportunities. And so each town has a master plan that kind of, as I said, sort of lays out the goals of where they want to be for the next 10, 20 years, and how they're going to get there. And as I said, and as you're probably well aware, there are a variety of towns. There's urban towns, rural towns, there's the highlands communities, there's the coastal communities, the Pinelands. We have, quite the variety in such a small state of issues and opportunities in planning. There's the nonprofit sector as well, and that's where I got my start. And it was nice to hear Doug mention watersheds. I worked for what was called the Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association at the time. Now it's called the Watershed Institute. And I had started their municipal planning program there. And so in that particular watershed, there's 26 municipalities, and we worked with a lot of them specifically on water-related issues and watershed issues. But we started getting into more development issues as well, where towns felt that there was too much development happening, that it was going to impact their waters. They would call us in to help advocate for them. And educate the developers, educate the elected and appointed officials, educate the residents about why a particular development might not be right for the community based on the impact it might have on the watershed. And then in the process of that, we work with the municipalities to help them create regulations that would have a beneficial impact on the watershed. So it was great. It got to a point in that position though where I wanted to be the one doing the implementing, not just the educating and advocating. So that at that point, that's when I left and got my my planning licenses and went into consultancy. Professional planners in New Jersey, in order to practice in New Jersey, you don't necessarily have to have a license. You do have to be certified if you want to do things like write technical reports and testify in front of towns, and represent a community in terms of planning. So in New Jersey, you have to have a state license as well as be licensed through the national accreditation board. So I have both of those licenses to help me do that. In terms of other careers, there's the municipal route as well. So as I said, Westfield has a staff planner. Not all towns do, and when they don't, they contract with a group like ours to help them do their planning work. So there's certainly an opportunity to go in on the municipal side and plan for a town as well. And then there's, the private companies, planning consultancies like the one that I work for, that, specializes in municipal planning. So a variety of things to think about there. I guess I would just, to sort of end off, I would just say that, it's interesting. People wonder about the value of planning. A lot of folks think you get a big report that kind of sits on a shelf, but really what you're doing is you're planning for the future of your community, and you're planning for the areas that you want to preserve and protect. And to me, that's a green career for sure. So I will leave you with that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about my career and my my path to getting there. So thank you very much.
Angela, that was incredible. And it sounds like you have a chance through, it sounds like you were talking about education and advocacy. And then it sounds like as you're talking about what you're doing, that not only are you still advocating for the environment, but you're also giving these communities a chance to become more resilient against a lot of the changes that are showing up too.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's really exciting stuff. So Pam, you are up next. You jump to there and okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Westfield Green Team. Like everyone else said, I'm really excited to be a part of this and grateful that I was invited. And I want to thank all the young people who are tuning in and watching this later as well, and applaud you for considering career in a green industry, and encourage you to keep looking into that, because I found it to be very rewarding. And I'm gonna, my career has been varied, and so I'm gonna kind of walk you through that and talk about some of the things that I've really enjoyed and felt really lucky to have been able to experience, and how you can tie that to what you might want to do. And so I'll start by saying that I'm an urban forester, and my education is in traditional forestry, or you might call it rural forestry, out in the woods forestry. And then I kind of transitioned into urban forestry, which is our trees in the places where we live. And now I do a lot of teaching about forestry. So that's been a really interesting path for me. But the thing that's been really exciting about it is that each step I have taken has informed the next one. So I've really been able to build off of what I've learned and what I've experienced to every next step in my career. And I think that has been really cool. And that's something that, you should think about whatever career you end up pursuing. You'll start in one place and you might end somewhere totally different. And that is so okay. Because, you're young and the things you like to do might change. So don't feel weird about not knowing what you want to do. You'll find your path. But I'm a forester, specifically an urban forester. That's the context where I work. I'm also a New Jersey licensed tree expert. So that's a thing. In New Jersey, you can be licensed as a tree expert or a tree care operator. It's a relatively new law in New Jersey, passed in 2017, that if you're going to sell tree care services in the state of New Jersey, you need to be licensed and registered with the Board of Tree Experts. So that, I think, is a really important step in this relatively new field. Urban forestry, if you compare it with other careers, is a relatively new career. Not new like yesterday, but new within, decades. And so I think it brings great seriousness to the work, the seriousness that it deserves to have a license attached to it. And a lot of people don't know about it. So I wanted to make sure that you know that. As far as how I got started in trees, I always loved a walk in the woods. I grew up in Leonia, New Jersey. See, I went to Leonia High School, and this was a really small town, 1 square mile town in Bergen County, and I walked everywhere, and I loved to walk. And I was fortunate to grow up near a nature preserve in the next town over called Flat Rock Nature Center, I think Flat Rock Brook maybe, and that was attached to Allison Park, and that was about 250 acres of wooded trails. And that was my favorite thing to do when I had time, was just to walk around in the woods there. But I would also walk to the woods. And then I found myself looking at the trees in the woods and looking at the trees along the street and then the front yards and the backyards of the houses I walked past, and kind of comparing them and thinking about, you know, what are the trees that I see in the woods and how do they look different on the streets? And then what are the trees that don't exist in both places? And that's really what got my interest started in trees and forests in whatever context we can find them. So I went to school at the State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse. And I got a bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Science in Forest Resource Management. And so my concentration there was commodity production silviculture. So my plan was to go out into the woods. This was very traditional rural forestry, and grow trees to build stuff out of them, right? And that's a really important thing to remember for me, is trees are a renewable resource, right? That's building materials and paper that, you know, when we use them, we can plant more and grow more. And if we do all of that sustainably, then we have this resource that we can just keep drawing on, that provides not only the things that we need, you know, to live, like food and shelter and many supplies, but, you know, we can also use them for recreation and relaxation, right? Wildlife habitat, and they provide clean air and clean water and do all those other things that trees and forests, you know, provide for our benefit. And I wanted to make sure that that was done sustainably, right? So that's what got me interested in forestry, that we can use the woods, but then if we're using them properly and sustainably and making sure that all of the management that we're doing is aimed toward the future with an eye for, you know, regeneration and reforestation and making sure that we have this continual healthy resource, then that's a really cool thing. And so that's where I started my career. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought that was, you know, really cool. But I grew up in Bergen County, and I around a lot of people, and I got lonely in the woods in traditional rural forestry. And that's where I kind of found urban forestry. So I think I'm getting ahead a little. Well, no, that's fine. So went to school, I worked in traditional forestry. I got to do a lot of cool things. This is what I want to say about rural in the woods forestry. You get to see places that not a lot of people see. And that, I think, is a really cool thing about that. Like, I worked for Fort Drum in Watertown, New York. That was my first job out of college in forestry. And I was marking timber for salvage harvest. There had been a terrible microburst, the windstorm, broke a lot of the trees apart. And the woods were really unsafe to work in. And that was the training grounds for, you know, Army's Fort Drum. It was a training center. And it was unsafe. It was 100,000 acres of woods that were largely broken apart from this windstorm. And those trees were going to die because the tops were broken off. So my job was to go in and mark for salvage harvest, to utilize what could be utilized in after that storm. And you get to see things that people just don't see, you know. And then after that job, I went to work to a full-time job. That was seasonal. A lot of your work in forestry right out of school is going to be seasonal. You kind of sit there and pay your dues. And then I went to Northwoods Forest Improvement, which was a private consulting company, also up in the Adirondacks. And there I was also taking forest inventory and sometimes marking for harvest for private landowners. But I did a lot of inventory work, which is just kind of surveying the forest to see what the structure is, what types of species of trees we have there, and how many and how old they are and how healthy they are, and what they can be used for, and how we can make sure to be, you know, perpetuating the forest there, to make sure that they're regenerating and growing to the best of their ability. So I did that work for several years, and I really think the coolest thing about that is just being in the woods all day and seeing places that people just don't see. But it went against my Bergen County roots, and I needed to be around more people. So that's why I kind of transitioned into urban forest, which I also really, really love. And as I said at the beginning, I think I was able to take all of my silviculture, which is the management of forest stands, pieces of forest to grow trees, and kind of overlay that on the urban environment, right? And then think about how the street trees that we plant on municipal property, and then all of the trees that exist on private property in each individual yard really create a forest where we live. How that is such an important thing. And while the resources or the products that we're getting from the urban forest are not the same as the traditional forest. We're not building buildings usually out of our street trees, but we are, gaining such resources in terms of clean air and water, right? Our street trees and our urban forests do a lot to mitigate stormwater and improve our air quality and give us shade and reduce our energy costs by shading the air conditioner so it doesn't have to run as much. So it keeps our house cooler, but then it also reduces our energy bill. And then because our air conditioner isn't running as frequently, we're not creating so much emissions to put back into the air, right? So it's kind of the cycle that the trees really contribute to. So I got really excited about looking at trees in that context, in the urban forest. And as I started my work in urban forestry, I was with the New Jersey Forest Service for many years in their urban and community forestry program. And again, I got to do a lot of really cool things. I worked with forest health, and for those of you who live in the southern part of the state, central part of the state, and know about trees, you might notice that there are a lot of towns in New Jersey whose mature oak trees have been dying over the last 20 years or so from a disease, the bacterial disease that trees get called bacterial leaf scorch. And I got to work on a project where we did research. The Forest Service partnered with Bartlett Tree Research Company and Rainbow Scientific Tree Care Advancements, which is a chemical company that comes up with treatments for trees. And we did a 3-year project where we looked at trees all over the state that showed signs of this disease, bacterial leaf scorch, and then tried different treatment programs to see if we could come up with something that would help to, slow down or reverse this disease. And so, I got to fly all over the state in a helicopter at, just above the treetop looking for trees with disease. That was really cool and not something that I thought I would get to do, as an urban forester, but that's where it. We also had an infestation of Asian longhorn beetle, which is a large black and white beetle that eats through the wood, the center of many species of trees that are commonly planted in New Jersey. So when I was with the Forest Service, we partnered with the Department of Agriculture, and I got to work on this project where the Department of Agriculture had a very aggressive program where they went into the towns that had this insect infesting their trees, and they cut down all of the host trees, all the trees, within a half-mile radius of where they found one of these beetles in the trees. And then my job was I had a team from the New Jersey Forest Service, and we went in and replanted. So after trees were cut down to try to stop the spread of this beetle, which was successful, this beetle was successfully eradicated from New Jersey, which is kind of a rare accomplishment, but something that this aggressive program really did. And then I got to be part of that. And then I came and knocked on every door where a tree was removed and planted if that homeowner wanted it. And that was a really cool thing to be able to do. And that's why those I've included for my pictures here, tree planting. That's one of the favorite things of my entire career. One of those pictures is from very early in my career, and one is from a couple of years ago. And I'm still planting trees with my friends. And I think that is a really cool thing forestry in New Jersey is, a small community. There are not a lot of foresters in this state. And so we all kind of know each other, and we work together, and we collaborate, and we help each other. And it's, even though some of us might be competitors in business, we're foresters first, and working for the resource first, and everybody helps each other out. And for 23 years, I've been planting trees with my friends. And I think that's a really cool thing about this job and this industry. So those are some things I did with the New Jersey Forest Service. The central part of my job there was that I got to work with municipalities and planners often, or shade tree commission members, usually shade tree commission members, but all different aspects of municipal programs to care for their trees. And the state of New Jersey has a law that provides liability protection for local tree care programs that participate in this program with the State Forest Service to write a management plan and to get some training for their volunteers. And if they do those things, then they have protection for their volunteers who are working on their tree resource. And that's a very cool thing also. And that's something that I still work on today in my role at Rutgers. So after I left the Forest Service, I worked in private industry for a while for a company called Paul Cowie and Associates. And a really cool thing about that job, that company is consulting urban foresters. And another really great thing about forestry in New Jersey, and I think in general, and especially in the urban context, is you get to work as a content expert on a lot of interdisciplinary teams. And that's really interesting. Like in the example from the Asian longhorn beetle infestation, where my team was the content expert in trees, and we planted trees, but we worked with entomologists from the Department of Agriculture who were experts on the beetle, right? But the trees weren't enough information on their own, right? And nor was the beetle. Because the beetle was impacting the tree resource, you needed foresters and entomologists to work together to get it right. When I worked for Paul Cowie and Associates, we often worked with landscape architects and planners to do large, landscape scale projects, because you needed an arborist and a forester and a planner and a landscape architect to all work together, to all represent their individual disciplines to get the best outcome. And that's just a really cool thing, I think, about this field and these environmental fields, where you can be one of those experts and work with a bunch of other experts and learn a lot of different things and meet a lot of great people. And it's really interesting. And I'll end by saying all of this led to me wanting to share what I've learned and what I've experienced with others. And I wanted to teach. And I think, a lot of foresters go into forestry because they don't really want to all day. And but people need to know about forestry. So I went back to school, got certified to teach, and am currently still studying to get a master's in education. So fingers crossed, because I want to be able to share what I've learned and encourage other people to look at forestry as a career. You don't think about it as one of, a natural place to go in New Jersey, but New Jersey's 40% forested. And, especially now we're looking at trees for carbon, and we want to think about growing our forests in any context sustainably. So thank you for listening, and encourage you to look at forestry as a career.
Pam, thank you so much. It sounds like you're seeing a lot of challenges, and dealing with the invasive species is pretty huge. And I'm wondering, actually, for all three of the panelists. So Pam, you mentioned the longhorn beetle. I think we also have the emerald ash borer hanging out in New Jersey.
Yes.
And we also seem to have a spotted lanternfly problem now too.
Yes.
Is there any one invasive species you feel is like at the top of the list that we've got to deal with first, or are they all bad?
Well, I mean, everyone's going to have a different answer to this, right? They're all bad. For me, in the context where I work, the emerald ash borer right now is very dangerous, because the way that it kills a tree is it eats the cambium layer, the living layer of cells that's just underneath the bark. So, and then it attacks all true ash trees. So that genus of tree, when it dies, dries out really quickly and becomes brittle and can break apart. And then that becomes very dangerous when those trees are large. They're large shade, and they were, planted a lot in New Jersey. And a lot of people have them in their yards and maybe over their homes and over the places where they park. And so to me, for just a safety reason, emerald ash borer is a really important problem.
Excellent, thank you. So I have a few questions for our panelists. It sounds like even though all three of you do very different things, it seems like all three of you have some similar challenges that come across, like either daily, weekly, or monthly. It sounds like each of you are going to be having to address different stakeholders in different sorts of scenarios. And it sounds like there could be times where you could have multiple stakeholders who are on opposing sides of the table. Could you talk to us possibly a little bit about how you help guide people or help inform people who may be, because I know, Doug, you were mentioning fishing versus wind farms. Angela, I imagine there's development versus green spaces. Pam, I could also imagine that there is like which trees need to be saved in a neighborhood and which trees have to be taken down for safety. So could anyone like tell us a little bit more about stakeholdering and how you all deal with them? All of you.
I'd be happy to jump on that, Jeffrey. And that is a similar thread amongst all of us. And I've worked with a whole suite of stakeholders in the marine ecosystems and industry groups, with the cooperative extension. Designed to be off campus from the main campus of Rutgers to be doing educational programs and research to address local stakeholder needs. And some of these items, such as fisheries management, now interactions between offshore wind and fisheries, climate change issues are some of the most controversial. Summer flounder management, Atlantic cod management. You can't get much more controversial than some of these subjects in resource management. So especially wearing a Rutgers cooperative extension hat, one of my approaches is to remain objective and science-based information in my works, both my education or in designing research that meets the needs. In the fisheries management example, there are fisheries management councils, state, federal, international levels. There are representatives from either universities, nonprofits, fishing industry. They handle a lot of the actual decision making. And then as an academic in my role, I feel most appropriate and most productive in those spaces of providing objective science-based information for those decision makers.
I'll add to that in planning, with any project we work on, there's always a public outreach component. And so we do our best to engage all factors of the community, all age groups. And one of the things we're working on right now is there was new legislation that came out in February that towns now need to do what's called a hazard vulnerability assessment as part of their master plan. And what that's really focusing is on things related to climate change. So areas that are particularly vulnerable to flooding, or, thinking about Pam with yours, if there are certain tree stands that are particularly vulnerable to a certain disease or insect or whatever, that we would bring in somebody to help study that to figure out how we can best protect those resources. And part of this is also reaching out to vulnerable populations. So in cases where there's like an emergency evacuation needed, or how do you get information out to different populations of the community? In a lot of our public outreach now, we are focusing on trying to reach underrepresented communities, so the minority populations in the towns. We did a bike and pedestrian safety plan in a town recently where everything was translated into Spanish, and we made an effort to reach out to, in this town particularly, they have pretty equal parts Filipino, Hispanic, and non-Hispanic communities. So we made an effort to learn about those communities and how they respond to participating in public outreach sessions. So you know, in terms of trying to engage all stakeholders, you're going to get your naysayers. You're going to get people coming to the meetings, you know, being the negative Nellies on everything. But you know, those voices also help shine a light on some of the issues in the town as well that maybe aren't always addressed. So I always like to bring those voices to the table and take everything under consideration. So that kind of covered a lot there. So
I would love to just echo what Angela just said. That was kind of going to be the crux of my message, is that, you know, you are going to have opposing opinions, and you might feel that, you know, your way is based on science and clearly the best thing, but you need to listen to everybody because there's something there. So I think, you know, when you're talking about stakeholdering and engaging communities in those tough decisions about conservation and preservation and whatever it is, you need to listen to the other side and hear them and incorporate what everybody is concerned about, and that's how you're going to have your best result, I think.
Yep, and that's excellent. And I think that starts to address the question that Sam asked a little bit earlier. He was asking about how we can work together as an international community to deter climate change. And I think all three of you, it sounds like, working together and listening to everyone at the table is a big step in the right direction, regardless of where we agree or not. Sam went on to ask, he said that I know the UN is trying to create climate regulations, but at the end of the day, many countries and also many individuals are acting out of self-interest and not agreeing to it. And he said that he feels we need to take action as a global community, but I don't know if it would work. And are there any recommendations that each of you have from your fields of expertise to help either combat climate change or make us more resilient or more adaptable to the face of climate change?
well, I would say there's a wonderful resource in our state called Sustainable Jersey. If anyone has not heard of this group, you should definitely look them up, sustainablejersey.com. They are a certification program for New Jersey municipalities. As I mentioned before, there's 565 towns in New Jersey. I believe well over 80% of the municipalities in the state are participating in this program. And they've outlined a whole host of actions that communities can take to combat climate change and to make their communities better. Sometimes on an individual level as well, with they have some homeowner programs as well and actions. So Westfield is certified, silver certified in that program. And so slowly, I think New Jersey is, and I should say this program is 10 years old. So it's taken 10 years for 80% of the towns to accept the program and participate. And it's a great program. And, they certainly look at it from a global perspective, global meaning from New Jersey perspective. As I said, down to the homeowner level. So I would recommend checking it out for some suggestions for yourself or for your community. And they also have a schools program too, certification for schools.
Excellent. Medea, did you have any questions or anything you'd like to add?
To thank everybody for joining us today. And we're recording these and we're going to share them out. So students that are watching, please feel free to share the recording link once we have it with friends and peers and your teachers too, in case they want to share it. And thank you for everybody. Thanks, Jeff, for hosting.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to our participant panel for coming in today and sparing your time to share with us. This was really amazing and a fantastic exposure. This was great to hear from all of you. We wish you all the best of luck and a happy and wonderful spring. For our studio audience, thank you for coming in. We look forward to hearing from you what you thought of the sessions, and we hope everyone has a great rest of the day and great rest of the afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Going to stop the record. Stop.